tonight we are wrapping up this fun process that we've had together by hopefully coming to some consensus around strategic priorities. And once we get started with the first work session, feel free to kind of move your tables out a little bit so you're not quite so cramped. So what I would like to do tonight is review what we have accomplished thus far and also bring to bear how the work that we did in the first session, the larger community session, and the work that we did last session, the context map, will help us determine those strategic priorities. We're also going to look back at the vision, which we tweaked a little bit at the last session, and make sure that we all still get those goosebumps when we see it. Same with the mission. And then we'll actually come back to the goals at the end to see if that's something that the strategic priorities have kind of taken the place of, or if those need to be updated as well. Questions about tonight? Other than what time will we get out? All right, so at the end of the last session, we had significantly shortened the vision statement to the vision of Cannon Falls Public Schools is to inspire learners to reach their potential now and in the future.
Good response.
Thank you. It's not just me. We had played around a little bit with a couple words and the comma placement, but does everyone feel like this really resonates? Awesome. I think it is a very aspirational vision statement, and one that you can easily remember and that can help direct decision making. So kudos to you. Your first product has been completed with your updated vision statement. Check. Next comes the mission statement. So Cannon Falls, this is a question I had because sometimes I see it as public schools, sometimes I see it as area schools. Area? Okay, so I will get that corrected in the final product I share back to you. Cannon Falls area schools, partnering with families and community, will provide a safe, nurturing, challenging, and inspiring environment to educate all individuals to be lifelong learners and responsible, productive citizens.
Goosebumps.
Love it. Yeah, I think the only tweak we ended up making was the adding in the safe component. And I actually really like that your mission statement is still so strong that you didn't feel the need to start from scratch with that. So, second product done. Good job. All right, the context mapping. Was everyone here at the last session? That's okay. So you get to see what was produced without having to do the work. Good job. So I couldn't get it to fit on letter-sized paper. It's the first time ever. So I printed it on larger paper. At least you can read it. Some of them get very small. So basically, this is just a pretty format of those lists that we made last time. And as a reminder, the context map, the purpose, is to really ground us in the pieces that we have influence over and that we can change and impact in the work that we do. And if you recall, as we created this document, most of these bullet points are things that are out of our control, with the exception of quite a few of them under educational trends in the upper left. that's kind of the area where we do have a little bit more freedom and leeway to select what is happening. But the other things impact the work you do every day, but you can't control them. And that means you can't necessarily plan around them. You have to plan for them because it's just part of the way the world is. So I would invite you to take a peek at this if I misrepresented any of the comments, or if anything pops out at you as being missing, please let me know and I can fix up the document as well. But any questions or comments about the context map?
We got a group focus on student needs.
Yes, and I couldn't fit it on the page. So I do have it separate, and I was going to put it into a different graphic. So the question was about the student need piece and how that really centers us. I'm going to put that on the second graphic that will emerge out of tonight, which is really about how are you striving to meet your vision, mission, and meeting those student needs, and what are the strategic priorities that are going to drive you to it. So very good question. Thanks for clarifying. The information is not lost. It's just going to show up on a separate graphic. All right, so keep these with you tonight as we move forward. Take them with you, frame them, refer to them on a daily basis, or recycle them, whatever works for you. So the next piece is around strategic priorities. And thank you for making these copies. I had handed out last time the little sheet here that kind of prioritized the things that were shared at the community session. And so we've got a couple of these plus any that you already brought with you for each table. These will be primarily reference points as well. But I'd like us to take a peek at these before we proceed. So the first priority area that we talked about that first night was academic excellence. I put up on the screen the pictures of the original easel pads with all the dots. The dots are what are represented in the central column here. So I have sorted these things based on the number of individual dots. So a couple of things that rose to the top for things to, so as we're thinking strategic priorities, keep in mind that all of this information kind of feeds together into what comes out as priorities. So a priority will probably not be stop doing something or start doing something, but will probably be more of a, our school will focus on ABC. Usually written in a real positive light. So even if it is stopping something, it would be written as you will improve efficiencies by changing our focus from A to B. Okay, so just to kind of explain how the wording goes. But as we look under academic excellence, the college and schools, PSEO, and CLEP, which you educated me about, I did not know about, rose strongly to the top as something to start doing. Stop defining students by a grade or a test score rose to the top. And then continue with individualized learning and PLCs was also strong. So as we move forward and start to think about strategic priorities in your group, I just want those to be in the back of your mind. Not that what came out of the community input session is, what should become a strategic priority. But it's something to consider, as well as the other ideas on this page. The next thing we talked about was school climate, which is on the next page. And under START, the expanded mental health resources got a lot of dots. People basically just want a therapy dog. No, I'm kidding. It's much more than that. Talking and listening to students with respect, finding balance with technology were also high on the list. Under STOP, so there was inconsistencies with safety and security. Stop devaluing failures, challenges, and struggles. So that could be a start encouraging learning from failure and challenges, and making assumptions before getting facts. And then under continue building connections and relationships, continue PBIS, and continue a variety of curricular and extracurricular opportunities to meet interests. So those kind of rose to the top. I'm basically just reading off the ones that are 10 and above. Under community and partnerships, you see a strong dot matrix for a joint board between the city and school board. That's pretty cool. Or at the very least, perhaps more communication amongst those stakeholders that are listed there. More centralized district communication, both in the newsletter and public forums. Under stop going for the cheapest. Do the best voting. I'm not sure what that meant. Does anybody remember what that might have been referring to?
I don't know how voting fits in.
No, do you? Yeah, they were.
I think that was the voting piece was based on stop making decisions based on what we think people will vote for and try to encourage
Do
people
the
to
right
vote for
thing
what
as
the
opposed to-
best thing is.
Oh, okay. Okay, so kind of a communication thing as well. Okay, and then under continue partnering with United Way and local service groups. And then the group there had listed a whole bunch of ideas in green of different businesses and organizations to reach out to for partnership, which is awesome. All right. Under effective and efficient operations, under START, retaining good staff and offering competitive pay and benefits. And the metro piece, I assume, is that you have to compete with schools in the metro area because you're within traveling distance. So that would be very important. And B, planning and budgeting for capital expenditures and developing process and inventory baseline needs, such as the band room. Under stop making short-term decisions without planning for long-term impact. Continue operating within our means and looking for ways to increase funding. Good idea there. And the last but not least bucket was buildings and grounds, facilities and grounds. Under START, long-term maintenance planning with dollars and budget. Under stop accepting Band-Aids for chronic problems such as leaking roofs with garbage cans. And continue working with city to maintain and update where needed there's some examples, and have a maintenance schedule. So before we move on, I would just, and this was kind of the homework piece too, to look at these and think about them. Are there any pieces here where we feel like we need to have discussion amongst yourselves? You know, are there any elephants in the room that need to be discussed? Are there any concerns that came up that we need to discuss first? Are there any things that might be based on misinformation or miscommunication that we need to address first? Those sorts of things, so that we move forward kind of with a good understanding of what these comments might have been indicating as well. Or anything that kind of pops out that we need to talk about this first.
I just think it's interesting though. We've got this context map and we've got the things that we can control and we can't control. And then we look at some of these things that get that got a lot of dots. Retaining staff with competitive pay, long-term maintenance. Where do just working out the dollars and cents as far as all these priorities with what we can control and can't control seems like a pretty daunting task.
In terms of prioritizing the dollars you have available to
Could be.
you?
I mean, right now we've kind of got a finite funding source. It just seems like we've got some pretty, I'm not saying they're wish lists, but we've got some things that we think are priorities. So where does the money for those come? What do we look then at some of these stop categories and think, well, we can eliminate this and we can, eliminate that, or I guess maybe I'm getting ahead of what you've got planned for us. I don't know, but that just seems to be a concern of mine, is that we've just got some things on this list that we'd love to do that, how do we fund it?
In my mind, I think all of these things are doable on here, but I think the purpose of this exercise long-term is to point, or have the board come to a consensus on what's important to them, and then point the ship to make sure that you can reach all of these goals, and making sure that your dollars are always pointed toward those top 3 priorities so that you can reach these goals. I don't think anything is unattainable here. Is it gonna happen tomorrow? No. It's gonna take a little bit of time, but I think it's getting the mindset around, okay, here's what everybody says is important, and then making sure that we're all aiming that same direction instead of, a few people going off over here finding something else important. It's coming to that consensus and understanding of why we need to do these things the way we need to do them, so that we can achieve all of these things.
Stay in the course.
Stay in the course. Everybody rowing in the same direction.
Very nautical theme.
Huh?
Very nautical theme,
It is.
yes. I think that was a great way of framing it. Do I expect all of these things to show up on an action plan? No. But the value of this is also, so this will help us in our next steps tonight of really focusing in on about 3 things that are the highest priority, that will have the most impact for the district and the students. From there, looking at some of these things and where do they come in? How do they come in? Do they play a part? Is there any low-hanging fruit that would be an easy thing to add as a strategy on an action plan under a bigger focus area? Are there things that are gonna take a longer term to have the discussions to make a decision about, and then plan backward from there? We need to decide what we're gonna do with, I'm not gonna pick one of these because I don't wanna lead us down there, but what we're gonna do with X, and what's it gonna take to get to that decision, and then plan backward for whatever meetings have to happen, or et cetera. So it's more just the group of people that came together that night, keeping in mind that there's a lot of community members, a lot of staff members that were not there, and what processes might be put in place to validate the information from that night or gather more input. Bless you. But the things that rose significantly out as priorities, both with stars and dots, I think might help us in our conversation at tables tonight about what those final three become. In the next 3 years, the board really, really wants the district to focus on A, B, and C. And that will probably mean allocating financial resources, which might mean unallocating resources from other areas. So the stops could become important in that. Or it might just be, applying for grants or getting creative with some funding or whatever that might look like. But it's kind of, by the end of the night, making a commitment to those 3-ish things over the next 3 years. And then it's the staff's job to figure out how to make that happen and how to keep the board in the loop and involved. Other discussion at the higher level? Yeah, so this is, I do just want to reiterate, this is a tool, not a guideline. And just like this, the context map, it's just for some foundation and for some discussion points. You could come up with a board direction tonight that didn't even show up on the first session because nobody had that aha that night. So it's not limited to this. Okay? All right. So we are going to talk a little bit about, I keep using this term, strategic priority. It's nothing new or exciting. We used to call them bold steps, and sometimes people get freaked out by the word bold, like they have to be huge and innovative and brand new, and that's not necessarily the case. It means that it's an intentional focus area that as a group you've discussed and come to consensus that it's really going to move your district from good to great. It's got high enough potential to be worth the investment of time and perhaps resources to impact your district. So it doesn't have to be big and bold and innovative, doesn't have to be something that nobody in the country has ever come up with before, but it does need to be strategic in the fact that you're thinking long-term and you're thinking big picture and you're thinking of final impact on the students and the community and the staff. We like to have a vision that is concrete enough that it gives direction, so not so vague that we leave here tonight and the leadership team is like, I'm not quite sure what they meant by that, so we'll just guess and go down this route. So we don't want it that vague, but we don't want it, we're not creating SMART goals tonight with, the timeline is 3 years, but nothing that concrete where it doesn't give the leadership team and staff the autonomy to figure out how to make it happen. So hopefully a vision, there's some clear next steps that could be taken or first steps that could be taken. And there's a clear, the end vision of that strategic priority is fairly clear in everybody's mind. So how will you know when you've accomplished it? If it's putting together a long-range maintenance plan, the end goal is you'd have a plan to present. And these wouldn't necessarily just be So the continue things here on our chart are great, they're already happening. Your staff's already knocking it out of the ballpark with the continue stuff. We wanna make sure that keeps happening, but that's not necessarily a strategic priority, to continue doing something great. That's just, at this point, kind of an expectation, because it's already happening. So we don't want something that's already in somebody's job description or a daily objective to become a strategic priority. Does that make sense? So what we're gonna do is start out, we're gonna use the Post-it notes again tonight. And think about what you think might be some good strategic priorities. I don't want you to get in your head caught up in the wording of these, or, you know, if it's a phrase or a sentence or 2 sentences, I don't care about that. One idea per Post-it, so don't write like a bulleted list on one Post-it, one idea per Post-it. And first, we're just gonna do this individually. So kind of thinking about the last 2 sessions, the information that's been provided, and no limit to the number right now. What do you, as an individual stakeholder here at the district, see as the biggest strategic priorities? Yes.
I don't know if this makes any difference or not, so don't take offense to any of this. We seem to be grouped up by board members, admin
Yeah.
team, teachers. Do
Let's
we
switch
need
it up.
to at least add some different connecting points
That is very good,
to
thank you.
stop group things?
So let us, stand up, we'll move the tables apart a little bit to give you some more room. And then mix and mingle, so you should be at a table with no more than one person you're currently at a table with. Yeah, if you need to double up the table, there's some extras. So just mix up amongst the tables. Try to make sure you're at a table where there's not more than 2 that were just at the table you were at.
No, doing the Yes, I will stay here.
Sure, we're adding another table too, so.
Oh, you know what, I'll move. I'll move. You guys stay some good.
Doesn't matter. Bye-bye.
No way.
Go with God.
Right?
I'll just go.
Be in the sidewalk.
Somebody's in there?
Amy, I think so.
Amy said, yep, they're going there. Go, Amy, sir.
How long does it drive?
So are we rating our own right now, or we're still getting off?
We're still getting situated.
Okay, so, yeah, we'll get there.
How you doing?
Sure.
All right, so can I have all the board members raise their hand?
Board member Bill? You have one of each. Do you want me to move to a different table?
If you wanted to move up here, that would give them a 4th person too, although I went.
Dave, you can come join us, or we already have a table.
Yeah.
I can move. Not too much.
How, like, where are the administrators? Principal, superintendent? That table.
Yes.
How about admin? That might be a better.
Any- And others?
Teachers?
No, just others.
Excuse me for calling you others.
Okay, the rest.
All right, that's a pretty good mix. Thank you. So, but I will take one of the 2 board members from this table to come up to this table.
Okay.
So as you're finishing up your own thoughts, I've changed the screen up in front to just have a couple of criteria around strategic priorities. So we obviously want our priorities to link to our mission and vision. We want to be able to accomplish them in a 3-year time span. Are these immediate actions or distant ones? It's okay if there's a mix in that, but we don't want a strategic priority that we can't start on, that we can't take some next steps soon on. Is it actionable or is it too broad? We talked about that a little earlier of you don't want it to be too vague, but you also don't want it to be too directive. Ideally, for the grammar smiths in the room, you'd like it to start with an action verb and describe an objective, but we can get there later. By the end of the night, we'll want to make sure that everyone can commit to the strategic priorities that we determine. And then most strategic priorities are iterative, meaning there's going to be milestones along the way. You're probably going to try some different things. There may be some failure involved, but you're going to have a plan of action in place to get you to the priority and goal. So if that helps anyone kind of evaluate things in your head as you start to try to think which thing is going to go where with the next step. Okay, now the one rule I have is no Post-it is left behind, okay? Do not throw away a Post-it, do not crumple a Post-it, do not do anything to your Post-its. I collect them all. Again, it's part of the documentation of this process because there's so much value in the ideas that are written down. And then that all goes back to the, why do I get period? Do you call it the admin team or leadership team?
Leadership?
Admin team, okay. So I share all of that back. What do you call yourself? Okay, so the next step, we're going to start working in your groups at your tables. You're gonna share your Post-its and start trying to see if there's, we call it affinity grouping, if there's any overlap in your ideas. So if you've got 2 Post-its that relate to facility planning, put them together. If you've got a couple 3 Post-its that relate to something similar, put them together. So try to get some groupings. And then let's do that first. I'll give instructions after you get your groups together. Okay? Questions? You might have to make yourself some table space.
And I think
I borrowed some of those.
maybe between
Safety, Jim, safety. Hand it on over, what did it say? Yes, a single one of my
Okay, I'm gonna grab your attention back again.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Those of you that still have a little grouping work to do, that's okay. You can catch up. We'll put you in a remedial class. But I do want to give the next instruction for those that are ready to move on. So I handed out some blue Post-its. We're going to get colorful tonight. So from your groupings, the next step at your small group is to see if you can agree on, well, I will cap you at 5 blue Post-its as a group. Okay? 3 to 5. The blue Post-its should be a little bit more developed into a phrase or sentence, more along the lines of a sentence. That represent a grouping of your yellow Post-its. So if you've got, say, 8 groupings, first you need to decide of these 8, which can we all agree are the 3 to 5 most important. Those are the things you're going to then focus on for your blue Post-its. and try to wordsmith a little bit into a sentence that describes the priority, the objective, the focus, the goal, whatever word you want to use. And that sentence goes on a blue Post-it. At the end of this part, you should have 3 to 5 blue Post-its that you all are in agreement with. Questions? Okay. Get started, and then if it's like, I don't know what James. All right. I know. Let's pull back together. I just have to give you all kudos, so you won't want to miss this part. I've worked with a lot of groups. I don't always just stroke their ego, so don't think this is typical, but you're such an engaged group, and I heard so many wonderful conversations happening. I found myself nodding my head a lot. Oh yeah, that's a good one. So we might have a hard time limiting these, but thank you for just bringing yourselves and being present in the moment and really engaging with one another. That's what it takes to get a good end product. So I was gonna do this the old-fashioned way and write things on easel paper, but instead I'm gonna type it because I think it'll be easier to move things around that way. So hopefully I made a good decision. So what I would like is one table to share one of your blue Post-its. Not all at once though, just one table.
Have a pre-K through 12
Pre-K through 12.
overarching standards-based grading plans.
Overarching standards-based grading plan. Did that start with HAVA?
Yep.
Amy, you said we didn't have to wordsmith this.
You have time to do a little tweaking if you need to. No, you do not have to.
I might.
So now I would ask, does anyone else at their table have something related to grading or curriculum?
You got good, 100%.
Okay, it's okay that there wasn't another. Thank you. Okay, now, would you like to explain that to everyone?
Pardon me,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, I was gonna say, why don't you explain it to everyone, because there's
I
probably
think
others.
that there's a lot of conversation when I was looking at the academic excellence page. There's a lot of things that I think there's like difference in thinking about that I think isn't clear to a lot of people. I think depending on where you learned how to teach, I think depending on where you came from, it's different, and that's all fine and good for a conversation. But when I was looking at this, there were a lot of things. So one of them says clear grade level progression by standards pre-K. Another one says educate on standards-based grading. Another one says start looking at other professional development models. Another one said chasing points, be concerned about learning instead of chasing points. One said there was one about like individualized learning. There were a lot of different things. And I think that if we can like back up instead of saying like, check off this standard, we learned it in this book on this page. And if we could say, here's a standard, do they know it now? Nope. Okay, do they know it? Oh, this kid worked with me, now they know it 2 weeks later. I know that looks a lot different in the secondary school. I can't speak for that as strongly as the elementary. But I think that if we had like a committee that could say like, here's the difference between looking at it as a whole and what that could be like district wide, I think could be powerful for kids. Yes, we have vertical alignment by standard and by grade level, but I think it's more by how are we meeting this instead of saying like, here's the skill, how are you gonna teach it? How do you know if they learned it? Instead of saying, check it off. And that's how I saw it when I tried to tie a lot of these things together. I think it's something that everybody's done and it keeps coming back, but I think there's like a difference in it that's getting broad.
Yeah, so that gets the, not only standards alignment, but also how we assess and different ways that we assess for different students, yeah. And then how we report that back in whatever grading system we use.
So when we wrote it as a sentence, we felt like if we had a standards-based grading plan, that would mean that those other things would have to be happening. So within 3 years, there's a standards-based grading plan. That means that there's education on what standards-based grading is. Like all of those other things that I drew lines to come back to how that happens.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, another table, someone share one of your blue Postits, please. I know that's a hard act to follow, but, okay, we've got one.
Develop a capital and operating referendum to address,
Okay.
to address facilities, staff wages, and other operating costs.
Okay, did anyone else have anything around a referendum?
We had developing an overall financial game plan.
We had stuff.
One moment. Okay, so other financial stuff. Okay, up here.
Create a budgeting plan that addresses short-term needs and projects long-term goals.
Okay, other financial,
Build fund balance to a level that satisfies the district's needs.
other finance related, yes.
Offer competitive pay to retain high-quality school staff.
Okay. Any others that feel related to that topic?
We had one, a staffing one, it just was recruit and retain quality staff.
Okay,
We had that as well.
written exactly the same.
It was. They stole ours.
Yeah.
Just forever.
We don't even care.
Okay.
We said recruit and retain quality staff.
Seriously?
We said retain, well, it was one of our yellows though, not a blue.
Oh,
We
you
put it all
can't
into-
share a yellow.
We
No.
put it all into the bag. We put it in to
Yeah, 'cause-
satisfy the district's needs.
Yep. Okay. Who would like to share another one?
Develop a long-range safety and security plan.
Other safety and security related.
We had facility, or develop a facility maintenance and safety measure plan.
We have.
Facility maintenance and safety measure plan.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we had a separate one that was create a district maintenance and facilities plan. So ours was different because we didn't say maintenance, facilities, we said facilities and maintenance.
So create a district what?
Create a district maintenance and facilities plan.
Sounds like plagiarism.
For the first
Emphasis
one
on
that you put
district.
out of those three, those last three, I
Yeah.
think ours goes with that one. We said improve finding balance between mental and physical wellness and safety for all.
There goes ours.
Say that again, sorry.
Improve finding balance between mental and physical wellness and safety for all.
We have a safety one. Continually improve safety and security in all buildings. And then we also have a maintenance plan one. And it is create and implement a preventative maintenance plan.
We have one that's kind of connected to the mental and physical wellness, and if not, then whatever we can do. Whatever. Create safe, supportive, and an affirming learning environment to prepare students for life's challenges.
We had promote our current student mental health programs while looking into staff programs to prevent teacher burnout, among other mental health issues.
Let me get my formatting corrected here.
It's funny how
The one about kid input.
Sorry. So I feel like even though there's some overlap, there's really two concepts here. One being more facilities related and one being more wellness, mental health related.
Yeah.
So even though safety and kind of encompasses both, so I'm just gonna.
We actually talked about that, but
Yeah.
we talked about the mental health piece as a part of the safety and security plan.
addressing mental health to prevent
Yep.
security issues.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave them in a big group then.
The last three dots, though, you might think of, sorry, that those are not.
We'll come back to it.
Yeah, those are not maybe totally part of.
Okay. Other blue Post-its.
We got one for, bring student voices to the conversation in order to keep them coming through the doors and attract new students.
We talked a lot about how it's super easy in these processes to lose a student voice. And we felt like when it went back to a lot of these parts, that'd probably be an important piece.
Cause I think, isn't that where we talked about like the PSEO students that were losing and trying to keep.
Well, and finding out if that's what they want, or do they
Right.
want different programs, or what are we missing?
And in the end, it affects the fund balance and everything else that we do.
We had developed a comprehensive communication plan, which encompassed a lot of different things. From how we receive information through surveys and student voices and interact that way. And then the pushing out of information systemically
With Jeff Talks.
with Jeff Talks. That one didn't get written down on the board.
I can't believe that.
Lori Letters, I like Lori.
No.
Jeff, I like Lori Letters better than Jeff Talks.
Oh, Lori
It's more
Letters.
alliterative.
How about Jeff Jabbers?
Jeff.
Just for the alliteration, of course.
Part of the communication plan was creating those joint committees with area governmental units like EDA, city council, and partnering and sharing of resources and grant writing and kind of those smaller activities that you can do with those resources or those other entities.
We gotta work on that one.
That won't go in the
Lori
notes.
letters kind of rolled off the tongue.
We said along the same lines, we said open communication between all educational stakeholders.
Other communication ones?
We have another one that goes back to the, like, along the lines of bring student voices into the conversation.
Oh, great.
It was Cannon Falls area schools will attract, and retain students.
Any others related to that? Excuse me. Sorry to anyone listening to the video that I just coughed in your face. All right, other blue.
Continue with common positive language for PBIS expected behaviors.
For PBIS, expected behaviors.
We only have one more. Continue to prioritize PLCs to aid individualized instruction and career pathways.
Did I miss something in there? Oh, okay.
The one kind of connected to that, offering multiple learning pathways for students to succeed while in school and after graduation.
Okay. What blue one, other blue ones haven't been read out loud?
I got one more. Creating a 21st century learning environment, which fosters communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity, and partnership with our communities.
Through Jeff James. We're on to something.
Only if there's a rule. It's coming together.
Spoken verse from Jeff.
All right, I'm actually gonna move that up by the other learning environment. Or was that one under safety? That was under safety. No, it's not. Okay. Any other blue ones that have not been recorded? Okay. Your next task. Got one more color. All right. So now from your blue ones and I'll make these a little smaller so you can see them. From your blue ones or any that you saw up here that your group is like, oh, that one was better. I want you to 3 green ones per table, okay? Try to hone in on the wording a little bit too. These are all good and getting close. So you only get 3 green, either from your own blue or anything else that came up.
Honest to Pete, I do it all the time now, I just sit there like this.
Yeah.
I still like this thing.
Okay.
What are we doing?
We're gonna hone in on the I think we're.
Okay,
It's like a 7.
so 3 green ones total, either from your own blue ones or if you'd rather pick from something else that was up here. which I'm trying to get on one screen just a second. Okay. So I'm gonna pull us back together. So I actually heard this come up from a few tables. And I just to kind of set the stage before we move to what will kind of get us to our final, whatever we want to call them. So some of the things on this list, as well as probably quite a few of the things on the yellow Postits, are more tactical and strategies to achieve a goal, which is why I want to retain all of those things and document them, because ultimately, once you start putting together action plans of how this is going to all roll out to make the end product work, some of those ideas will be helpful. So we don't want strategies or tactics at the end of tonight. But if we get too stuck on the term strategic in strategic priorities, we also don't want to go so strategic that it's not directive. So in one example with the communication plan, developing a communication plan to get the word out to the community. Technically, yes, that is a tactic to a greater end of, say, engaging the community. But if we were to, and if this is what you want, that's fine, I'm not telling you what you have to do, but if you leave the room tonight and one of your strategic priorities is engage the community, that is so broad that it doesn't provide very much direction to those that are going to have to carry this out, to be able to come back and say, board and administrative team, we have accomplished this strategic priority. And so the communication plan, while it is a tactic to an end, is still a very good, in fact, I was telling the back group, I would say 95% of the districts I've worked with, that's one of their ends. Now don't be saying, oh, we better make that one of ours then. But that's a very typical end product for the 3 to 4 things. And it's a longer term thing. It's not something that's gonna happen overnight. You could write it so that it's develop a communication plan so as to engage the community. So you've still got your why within the sentence. So I don't want to get too hung up on that, but just reframing that as we wordsmith so that, again, we're providing enough direction of what we want to see accomplished, but not so much direction that it's micromanaging. Does that help? Ish.
Just to clarify in my own head and hopefully some other people's heads, is the grand scheme of this whole process is to give us 3 or 4 areas to move forward with, and maybe have our admin team get together and say, okay, what are some action steps we can take back to the board to say that this is how we can accomplish this? And then have the board approve that. Is that kind of the big picture play on this?
This rolls out different in different districts as well. That's a very common way for kind of a next step. Also, as you said that, I wanted to say, just because, say, 3 things end up being kind of the strategic priorities, it doesn't mean that you can't decide or think something else that came out of this is important for us also to do. So it's not like we're gonna do these 3 things and nothing else. Not that. There may still be action plans around other things. So even though it's more than just the board in the room, the ultimate thing here is for the board to give the leadership team and staff clear guidance on what their 3 or 4 priority areas are. So for example, when we went through this process in December at my organization, our board came out and said, we want you to create multi-sector collaborations in the areas of student mental health. We want you to find a niche for Southeast Service Cooperative in workforce development in our region. And we want you to come up with new ideas for curriculum supports in schools. Woo, those are big ones, but, and so those gave us direction for our whole staff. We're still doing the work we've always done, but we're figuring out ways to focus on those 3 areas. And we have to report back to our board of how we're accomplishing the direction they gave us. So I don't know if that kind of helps the bigger picture too.
And how do you help to not lose the pieces that led you to them? I feel like those are the, how do you not lose that?
Yeah, so I would say that a lot of the groups that I've worked with, each of these focus areas, again, whatever term ends up working for you, strategic priorities, focus areas, goals, there's oftentimes a committee that's set up to focus on those. Sharing the documentation that I share back, and ideally, you know, those of you in the room being able to share things that you heard during the process. But that's the main reason that I document as much as possible, to kind of sift through that and say, well, this relates to that, the conversation was around this. Because a lot of those pieces really are more strategy and tactical and action plan pieces. So that's just a matter of asking for the documentation. Any other questions about what we're trying to nail down before we nail it down? Okay. So my first question would be, does anyone's green Post-it exactly reflect something on the board where I could just copy and paste it?
We put down the first one.
The first one? Okay. Any others?
Yeah, ours with the developing a capital and operating referendum.
Any others?
Creating the 21st century learning environment.
Close enough.
Any others from up here?
Yes, the continue to prioritize. Yep.
Creating a budgeting plan that addresses short-term needs and long-term goals.
Our last one was the develop facilities. Wasn't one of ours. Develop a facility maintenance and safety measure plan. Yeah, great. Oh. Down. Right there.
Thank you.
I think it's better
Okay, any other exact matches?
The last one,
The develop comprehensive communication plan one. Second last. That whole thing.
So I'm just gonna,
Yeah,
because these would be strategies under it,
okay,
I documented, but
okay. Can you add to that documented part in parentheses up there then, to really emphasize the student input part? That was our biggest, like, that's what we really highlighted
Okay.
on there. Sorry.
If we did something like that?
Sure.
All right, so now, new things, please.
It was mentioned, but not exactly. We added something to recruit and retain high-quality school staff, to ensure academic excellence, and grow student enrollment.
Any others around staffing or enrollment? Okay. Who else would like to share?
We said to develop and implement a safety plan that includes mental and physical wellness for all.
Any others around the safety or mental, physical wellness? Okay, someone share something else?
To offer a variety of learning pathways to help students meet the challenges and successes of learning, work, and life. Learning, work, and life.
Others around pathways or learning? Okay, next. So all the green ones have been shared out? Last chance. All right. So now, let's see, if this all fit. Now we gotta somehow figure out how to get this down to 3. And at this point, it's the group. So we've got, I'm gonna group things a little bit. There's a few things that are kind of learning and curriculum-y. There's some that are I would say the ones on the right are kind of education focused. The ones on the left are more process and business focused, for what that's worth. So who would like to really advocate for one of these? Or let's go back and ask this question. Do any of these feel like strategies or tactics for another one? Or any, oh, make it bigger, sorry. I didn't tell everyone to bring their magnifying glasses with them.
So, like, there's,
Okay, Yeah, sorry, I can't do two things at once either.
Topics. Budget and finance. Safety facility. And then learn.
We should move closer to it. So are you saying like, can the prioritize PLCs and then is that part of a strategy? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not calling one out specifically, but are any of these, super specific? Not really.
I think the PLC's one is pretty specific.
That is pretty.
That is very specific.
And that's also a continue. So unless there was something where we wanted to, you know, allocate additional resources
Part
or,
of the first one.
what's that?
It's kind of part of the first one at the top would be kind of like a strategy.
So I'm not gonna lose it, but I'm gonna
Group it.
move it. So let's think
on the left, the third and the sixth one are both safety plan kind of focused. I don't think it'd be combined or.
yeah, could we combine these two somehow?
Even the last bullet on the left and the top bullet on the right. Those could be connected.
These two?
On the right side where you offer.
This one?
Yep, like, that kind of comes into what you can offer is really about the school staff that you have and being able to provide those opportunities for students.
Is the very first one on the left developed by capital and operating referendum? Is that pretty specific?
That tells me, I was just gonna ask a question about that. That tells me that the group wants to create a list for a bond and also increase our operating to meet those needs.
So does it fit under number 2? Or not number 2,
The second bullet.
It might, it does seem like a
Or like it's like a, it's a
strategy
strategy to
yeah.
achieve.
Yeah.
Because if you select the first bullet as one of your final priorities, like that is telling the staff,
do it.
you will do this,
Right.
which may well
I
be
think
what
it
you're
might be
intending to
considered a
do.
strategy.
What's that?
I think it might be too.
To achieve balancing a budget or creating a budget.
So let's just think about that one for a second. Because a lot of the blue ones and quite a bit of the input from the community session had to do with fiscal plan, budgeting plan, what have you. So I do feel like there's a good rationale for having that be one of your final ones. So just to get us started, how do we feel about that wording? Is there any wordsmithing we'd like to do to the red? I think I can make it a little bit bigger now. Knowing that this is now a strategy.
I feel like budgeting is maybe kind of narrow. A budget is a very specific thing, where I think that like what we're
Financial?
talking about here, like either financial or fiscal,
Because that encompasses a broader range of.
Yeah, fiscal.
Well, business manager, what's the best word, fiscal or financial?
I like fiscal. Dollar bills.
Okay, do we like the wording? Do we have a focus / priority?
Actually, why don't you do financial instead of fiscal? Fiscal in our world is like a year, fiscal year. Financial is sort of just more of a broad type.
You know, can I just counter that by saying we put financial and make you limit the scope of that potential?
Could you
I
say
mean, whatever
fiscal
kind of
budget?
short-term
Like a year?
savings or long-term plans, financial has to be a piece of it.
Sure.
That makes sense.
So you're saying just take out the word?
So I'm saying take out financial.
But then it makes it very broad. Isn't short term?
Then you wanna have fiscal in there.
Exactly what you're talking about.
Were you saying
everything.
leave fiscal?
I think you need to have.
Yeah.
No, I was saying take it out.
Yeah, he's saying leave it broad.
Oh,
But isn't
I
that
think
what,
that's
isn't
too
this what a
broad.
strategic plan is creating a plan for short-term needs and projects and long-term goals
Yeah,
without fiscal in there?
I
This is
mean,
almost too broad,
yeah,
and not think, I understand what you're saying, but it's almost too broad, because then one could easily overlook the financial part of this somewhere down
and or just get lost in the planning and not get to the doing. That is one, regardless of what this word is. So one question I would have is, does there not exist a fiscal / financial plan? Because it says create.
I said fiscal's 1 year.
There's been some of the best laid 5-year plans that I've seen coming in here, but sticking to them and putting dollars to them hasn't happened.
Implement might be a better
So it's
word.
almost
Yeah.
like we're starting.
And that is,
Yeah,
that
that's
is,
a good one.
Implement is better, yeah. Cause that means that just
the
created.
planning part is there, but the assigning of dollars to it, and that's why I think it's important to keep that financial piece there.
It's too barbaric.
Because the word create to me makes it sound like you don't have anything in place, which I doubted.
The implementation.
And do we want to put a time in there? Implement a 3-year plan or no?
Gonna time in it?
What's that?
Do you want to see it say implement a 3-year plan or leave that out?
Do people typically put a time
I
on
think
these
the
things?
best part is it has to be implemented. We have 5-year plans for everything here, but if you don't put teeth or a halt run, it doesn't matter.
So we'll leave the timing to the plan part. Any other discussion around this one?
That keeps it just a financial plan, when I read it. But what if you said like a financially responsible plan? Then it's not just a financial plan, but it's a plan that's financially responsible. Does that make any sense?
It does, because then I think then that includes what
More
our
than
viewpoint
just the
was,
finances.
because it's not just the finances, it's the,
It's the prioritization
Right.
of what our
Of what
short-term
should be-
needs
Yeah.
and our long-term goals.
So then that begs the question, what are the long-term goals that we're projecting to with that statement?
To build a fund balance
Is it?
and maintain it. I don't know.
Yeah, so
Isn't that what the
I don't want the,
Or it could be preventative maintenance, or it could,
Right.
yeah, it's very
right,
open-ended.
it's too open-ended, in my humble opinion.
I like where that's going, but that still leaves, the short-term needs, we can identify it in an admin meeting, which we have been recently, to look at what are our immediate needs, like a broken elementary dishwasher. It's little things like that, but so we can create plans to fix those smaller needs, but what are the long-term goals need? We need a little bit more direction there, I think.
Is the word goals wrong?
Needs?
I don't know.
Yeah.
A question that kept coming up in our, or a statement that kept coming up in our group is something about the fund, is making sure that the fund balance is growing. The question that I have, cause I don't have a clue about how long it takes, is what's reasonable for this financially responsible plan for 3 years? You're talking about 3 years. Is it where is it gonna really be in 3 years? Like what is a good, I mean, really 3 years, how short, you know?
Right,
How do you
whatever we
establish
write
what
should
that
be
is?
We don't want it to
attainable.
go down. Like you
Well,
don't, you want
no,
it
I
to
know
just gain
that.
instead of.
But how do you know what, you know, how do
What's
you
a
get a gold
reasonable
star at the end of 3
expectation?
years
At the end of
if
3
that's
years,
your?
it should be within policy. Currently, we're not within policy.
That's what I
So
was
is that what you say?
Oh, that could be.
Implement a financially responsible plan that addresses.
That
Long-term
addresses
goals
short-term
within
needs and
policy?
meets board policy.
Long-term goals and projections.
And
Say what it
long-term
is, needs board
projections.
policy for the fund balance. That's what you're.
That brings the fund balance into policy compliance. I don't even know if we need short-term needs, because if we're.
Is that too
That
specific?
complies with board policy.
Because we can do that within, depends on how you want to do it.
It's a lot of the chicken egg cart and horse deal, because if you put a goal as a fund balance, that's awesome, but I think all of your strategy and all the plans are gonna revolve around the financing anyway, so you can't offer competitive wages as a fund balance doesn't allow for it. You can't offer more opportunities without the students in the building. So the fund balance is gonna be what it is, but it's gonna be dictated by all the other strategies.
It's the strategies that you use to make that fund balance grow, and it's not necessarily cutting expenditures. It's growing revenue also. Maybe we're trying to keep our kids from going PSEO, so we devise a strategy to keep kids here and get more revenue without cutting current program. So giving us wiggle room in there to be creative with what we're trying to do to meet the goal of getting back within our policy parameters. Does that make sense? Huh?
Okay, let's come back to that one.
You could see your brain.
That's my answer to everything when I can't come up with an answer. Let's come back to it. Okay, so we're still needing to. So if we assume one is gonna be something around that, that leaves us only a couple.
Can I get a little more detail on the develop a comprehensive communication plan that includes student input? I don't know what that means.
So it was a combination of two, one being having a comprehensive communication plan, not necessarily just community, but with some strategies like how do we collect input, how do we push information out, and then one of the pieces that we wanted to capture was getting the student's voice as part of that input piece. So wordsmithing necessary, but
For our
that's-
group, that arose from finding ways to keep kids here, knowing what they want to have.
From our group, it was strategies around surveying stakeholders, community members, staff, students. And then what do we do with that data once we have it? How do we create plans from that? And then the second part of that piece was not only communicating what we just learned, but also creating a systemic way of pushing out information so that people aren't getting information from 5 different sources. Or more.
And we also grouped the creating a community connection between the board and the city government also kind of fell under that as far as communication goes. We had a lot of bullet points under that.
Oh, and we have entrance
Exit.
and exit surveys for students and families coming in. Why are you coming here? What's attracting you here?
Would there be a strategy?
Right, yeah, but that's just under the big umbrella
Yeah.
piece of it. And then exit surveys for staff and students.
I almost wonder if all of that whole statement is a strategy for a portion of the one that's about create 21st century learning environment. The bottom half of that says, and creatively in partnership with our communities. I almost wonder if all of those things are a portion of a strategy for some of that, but I think some of it gets lost in the way that that's maybe said, but I don't know.
I do like that 21st century learning environment, because you can encompass a lot of different things within that. From facilities to what we do with the city, to what we do with communication, to how we run our curriculum, to the different
We talked
thinking
about
that we have with PSEO, to a lot of different things.
And the one, the have a great K through 12 overarching standards part might be a strategy for that great 21st century learning environment. Or might be something that you would tie into it or be just a part of it.
The learning pathways also could be a strategy for that, or within that.
So in
How about create a 21st century learning environment with all stakeholders, in partnership with all stakeholders? Is the fosters, the 4 Cs, is that necessary? It just gets to be,
Too wordy.
Those are typically the things that define the 21st century learning.
exactly.
So the one thing, and the reason I didn't put in partnership with our communities in red, that narrows how you read it. In my opinion, that when you guys were talking about a lot of different things being strategies under here, one of those would be partnering with communities. But like the standards-based grading plan, that wouldn't be in partnership with the community.
But would
And therefore it wouldn't fit.
Would stakeholders include that? If we changed communities to stakeholders, where it made it broader, which would include students and community and.
All of them.
Does 21st century learning environment encompass mental health
I think so.
and safety and
Well, it could.
fixing our
Yeah.
HVAC system? I mean, just,
I think all
that
of
is
those.
so broad when you talk
That's
about
how we
I was
creating
gonna
a,
say, how do you remember all the things that we're saying right now that encompasses?
when we're looking at a proactive system of making sure we're staying on top of our facilities to create that learning environment. I mean, that is a great statement, and it encompasses a lot of different things that we've talked about. Hopefully somebody's taking notes.
Well, I mean, all of these, this is part of my job, is to go back and say, the red part, and then underneath that are where some of the other bullets fell, as being strategies, so you won't have to watch the video again. With our stakeholders. Do we feel good about this one?
I feel very good about it.
I was gonna say, I think there needs to be a definition.
What's a 21st century learning environment?
So these 4 Cs are typically what defines a 21st century learning environment. And I heard over here the question of we're already almost 20 years into the 21st century, like when do we stop using that term? But it's still a,
Wouldn't you just say create a learning environment which fosters and leave those things and ditch the?
Here's what I know, if anybody Googled 21st century learning, you'd get a laundry list of websites to help you figure out what that is. I mean,
I think we have a good start on knowing what that is to us.
yeah. I mean, you could theoretically remove that.
But I think with the N, it can encompass the technologies and it can
that
encompass,
technology, social media.
yeah, the things that are specific to this day and age of learning.
So do we not have that right now then?
We're making steps
Well, we're making,
towards
yeah, and we're starting to have flexible seating in classrooms and but it's not everywhere.
I'm just wondering if does the word create imply that we don't have any facets of the 21st century learning environment right now?
That's true. That's true.
What did we do on the first one where we took out create?
Encourage or
Implement. Implement.
promote.
Yeah, I like that one.
Promote.
Promote a learning environment that's fosters.
Yeah.
Take out 21st century or not?
So I would,
It's a long time. I don't think worrying about being 20 years into it is a big deal because we still have 80 years left.
So
Let's not rush the 80 years.
So who are these
We'll be
aimed
making
at?
that strategic plan.
the opportunity.
keep us focused so that we're not here all night. A good question was raised, who are these aimed at? So these are coming from the board to the administration team, I'm sorry, I keep massacring your name, who then needs to figure out how to create action plans, committees, whatever it may take to make these a reality. I don't think these are, now, some districts have chosen to share out the final graphics with the community at large. Others don't, that's up to you. I mean, I could make the argument that technology, social media, et cetera, is a piece of communication, collaboration, creativity, et cetera. So it's one strategy used to foster those things. So I personally think I could take it or leave it with the 21st century piece.
I think as long as the people that are gonna be utilizing these strategies know what it is, it could probably be left in there, but if it was just a general layperson on the street who was gonna read this, who would have to Google 21st century learning environment, we don't wanna have to make them take those extra steps, but I think it's fine, assuming our admin.
Is there a
knows what it is.
consistent definition for 21st century learning when you Google that?
There's lots of different things that come underneath that.
Right, so if we have this layperson that Googles it, you might have one layperson say, well, they're not doing this strategy, and they're not doing this strategy, and they're definitely not doing this one.
I'm seeing a lot about technology is, I think, a given. Personalized learning is a very big piece of that. I think that the social emotional learning piece with the whole digital citizenship, those two probably come up the most if you're gonna Google that. Even at these tech conferences, it's fascinating, the amount of time spent on, are we teaching students how to be good digital citizens, making good choices and stuff like that. Well, that's using technology, but that's also just good citizenship practices, making good choices. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to have tech in your hands. Those are just decisions we
So, when you Google it, Ed Week says that 21st century learning means that students master content while producing, synthesizing, and evaluating information from a wide variety of subjects and sources with an understanding of a respect for diverse cultures.
So if we plan on using this as a broad encompassing statement for some of the actionable items that we have listed between mental health, communication, is that meeting what that just said? Or fixing the HVAC system, you know, creating plans around that for that environment piece.
Doesn't that fit in with the financially responsible for future?
The HVAC system is probably more for the environment than it is for, because if you create a comfortable learning environment, then kids will learn better.
I found something completely different when I Googled it.
That's so
So,
interesting.
yeah, it just depends what you check.
And that's where I think you use the word progressive learning environment or just learning environment?
Because then that just means you're keeping up with the,
Yeah,
with the
moving forward,
times.
sure.
You're moving forward.
Does progressive have any
Yes,
political connotations to it?
Oh.
absolutely.
You could say liberal learning.
That's good.
Yeah, you're right. People would take that.
And that was far from my mind, and I thought, that was not at all.
So do we have synonyms for progressive that don't mean
Modern.
modern?
21st century. So words.
Yeah, 21st century comes up.
Dynamic.
Let's put it that.
Ooh, I like it.
Dynamics. Okay, then.
Dynamic means ever changing.
Yes, that's good.
Adaptable, flexible.
I like that.
That's a good one.
All in favor of dynamic?
Yeah. I'm in favor of
You don't have a gavel.
All right. So we managed to fit most of the other things under that one. I would call out, what about something around, so a number of people in their blue Postits, there was a lot of the attract and retain high quality staff listed. And there was a lot of reference to enrollment and stuff. So I do ask about this one, which kind of combines the both of those. We need to add something to the front, but if that might be something to wordsmith around as well.
Is that the last standalone one that we have?
Well, the rest, so if there was the facilities, the safety, mental health, communication plan, learning pathways, standards-based grading,
Those are all in that last one.
which we dumped all in this one. So this is the only one, and maybe this falls under the
The learning environment. too.
learning environment and or responsible plan,
With as big as both of those items are,
maybe just two.
maybe just two.
Well, one thing we talked about with the recruiting and retaining is it's not necessarily financial. It can be cultural. And that you want to create a culture where people want to be there. So,
Which to me gets into the dynamic environment. You know, the climate and culture for your staff, the, you know, culturally,
well, it's diverse and
Yeah.
inclusive.
right. I like that word inclusive,
I do too.
because to me that speaks a lot to the mental health and safety component as well as the diversity and inclusion component.
Dynamic and inclusive learning.
I don't know. know, that's a lot of words.
Strategic statement.
What's that?
It's starting to feel a little bit more like a vision statement than a
Yeah.
strategic.
Is there a way to break it apart into like the learning piece of it and the other half that's like the physical and mental piece of it that we talked about?
Yeah, I think you just cut it off at promote a dynamic and inclusive learning environment. And then all of those other pieces can be listed under there as strategies to go with it, because communication, collaboration, critical thinking, you can talk about as 21st century skills.
Right.
You can include the safety piece, the mental health piece. Or is that too open-ended? Because I'm kind of open-ended.
I mean, it's certainly very open-ended. However, I was internally the box of communication, collaboration, you know, the 4 C's. Well, in theory, I like that. It does box some of it up in, like, so if we're talking about facilities, that doesn't really. I mean, I think the success of whether this works as a statement or not is in the next step, is really laying out what falls under that and then how we're going to prioritize those things. Yeah. So the comment I just overheard was, what if it was promote a dynamic, safe, and inclusive learning environment? We have talked about safety a lot. Or safe,
Or safe, inclusive, and dynamic, you know, the profession
whatever
or
order.
whatever that. Safety was mentioned a lot in the whole process from beginning
Yeah.
to tonight.
Well, what do you think of the idea of, if we start with this statement and, you know, I kind of create the, you know, kind of such as list. Yeah, I think there still needs to be a next step then of some sort of like mini action plan of those bullets of, you know, what the admin team suggests comes first or happens within this time period, or else you're gonna find yourself just with a laundry list of things to do that doesn't give you any guidance. I mean, we've narrowed it down quite a bit from 6 pages of ideas off easel pads, but I don't know, what do you think?
We would need some time administratively, I think, to put together some plans to bring back to the board, but I think that's kind of what we'd probably be looking, obviously, we're not gonna implement anything this year, we'd have to be planning for the next fiscal year to start putting some of these pieces in place.
Yeah, I mean, you've slowly put them together. You've written 2
What about the communication one?
so communication ended up getting lumped under environment as a strategy. I think in some ways, communication ends up under both of them. Whatever your plan is for both your short-term and long-term goals, you're gonna wanna communicate that. These are two definitely big, broad buckets.
Between what, 3 or just 2?
Oh, it doesn't, 3 is an arbitrary number, so it doesn't have to be 3. I guess my suggestion would be, start with these two, let me put together the lists under them, share them back, and then, you know, if we need any wordsmithing or, I don't know, I think we need to process and sit with it a little bit, to see. I'd like to hear both the board say, yes, these are what we'd like you to focus on, but I'd also like the admin team to have time to look at these. What does this really mean? What does this look like? What is the board really committing us to? What's feasible within these things? Because, I mean, we did dump a bunch under the one, and I don't want everybody to leave here thinking promote a safe, dynamic, and inclusive learning environment means that in the next 3 years, you will 100% have accomplished all these other things. Because that's not fair. It's not gonna, you know what I mean? There still needs to be some prioritization. But, yeah.
In my mind, the way is more and more we narrow that down and make it concise, whatever, it just keeps coming back to the vision statement. Like this, the dynamic, safe, and learning environment, if you go back to the vision statement, that's almost identical to what it says.
Yeah.
I think it's too broad.
So we need a little bit of time to process it and go through it is a good thing. Yeah.
If I were to put together basically like a online dot survey type thing, I don't know exactly what it looks like yet. I can work with you guys to figure that out. Would everybody be willing to do a follow-up online activity of some sort if I can keep it short to, so I just want these to be, yeah, that last sentence just feels, yeah. So let me do some thinking of what might be a good next step activity.
I think you have to look at what we're trying to stuff into that.
Yeah.
Almost, and then maybe we end up with 3 pieces.
Split that one in half.
Yeah.
Because we seem to want to stuff everything in that we haven't covered into that.
Yeah. And then they were like really big things like personalized learning and social emotional learning, all of which are very important.
And that's under
But,
yeah.
all right. So we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. I would have loved to say we're there. Yay, good work. But we'll figure out a way to, I'll circle back with Jeff and figure out a way to narrow this down a little bit more, or, yeah.
So is the next step kind of narrowing down at least something to bring to a board meeting to say, here's a draft. Pick it apart, because this is the feedback that you got from the group.
So typically, after this session, we would have, 2, 3, 4 clear statements of priorities or focus areas. We didn't quite get there. I would put that into a pretty little graphic, take it back to the board, is this what everyone heard? Are we all on the same page? Were there any concerns? Approve, check. The admin team then figures out how to make that happen. And, you know, the board says however often they want updates or to know how things are going, et cetera. That's not every district, I mean, it happens differently. So. Yeah. How are you gonna know when you have accomplished promoting a safe, dynamic, and inclusive learning environment? Like, it sounds great, I love the language. So Jeff, maybe either you and I or the admin team and I could do a follow-up.
Can we bring you in on a conference call?
Definitely, I'll do
During your
whatever
admin meeting time?
works, yeah. And it's just part of the process. We'll keep going until we finalize it, but I think having this cleaned up a little bit too, with the bullets in order, and might help that conversation a little bit as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would help.
Yeah. So how about we plan on that? I'll do some cleanup. We'll find a time when either I can drive up or call in or whatever that works with the admin team, and then have something to bring back to the next board meeting to say, how does this look?
Try for the 25th. Maybe shoot for something to bring back for the 25th, November 25th. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe if you can shoot me dates to check my calendar, for when the admin team is meeting or what have you.
We meet tomorrow at 1:30.
Okay. They're not available tomorrow at 1:30.
It's Tuesday now. Tuesdays at 1:30. But
Every Tuesday?
Yep.
Do you want that survey you're sending to all of us done first? Or is that?
Yeah, we'd probably get that done first, I'm guessing, is the survey first. Or do you wanna clean that up a little bit?
I need to clean it up a little bit. I need to think through options. Like, a couple days ago, it would have already been 10 o'clock. Yeah, I definitely need to just think through it. And I will be in communication what a couple options are, whether we do a little poll online before the admin team meets, or if we try to.
I have a feeling we're probably gonna have to clean this up and then something out, or send something out, get the feedback, and then go into admin.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Online poll survey thing. And then we'll have that's the board meeting. Okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry that we are not concluding with goosebumps today. However, if we put back up your vision, we're getting there. And that's goosebumpy. So yes, thank you very much for, again, 3 evening sessions with a lot of engagement. I very much appreciate it. And I think with very minimal next steps, we can massage this into what we need it to be. I'm very confident in that. So thank you.
Thank you.